This episode of the Fairway to Retail Success is brought to you by AGM vendor partner T-Commerce, the online retail solution for golf facilities. Give your members 24/7 shopping with no inventory risk. Visit tcommerce.shop to learn more. Now, back to today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fairway to Retail Success in AGM podcast. I'm your host, Justine Cook, the AGM's Director of Membership and Education. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Jared Henzlik, PGA Director of Retail at Big Cedar Lodge and the 2026 PGA of America Merchandiser of the Year for the Resort category. Jared brings over 25 years of experience spanning golf operations, specialty retail, and apparel sales management. He's worked with iconic brands like Polo Ralph Lauren, Peter Millar, Bobby Jones, Sun Ice, Summit Golf Brands, and Johnny O, and has been part of some of golf's most prestigious events, including 17 U.S. Opens, 8 PGA Championships, 4 Ryder Cups, and 5 Masters. Jared is known for his strategic approach, combining technology and personal connection to drive results, all while keeping things organized, fun, and vendor-friendly. Today, we'll dive into his insights on building strong relationships between buyers and vendors, navigating both sides of the table, and how his leadership style continues to elevate the retail experience at Big Cedar Lodge. Jared, thank you so much for joining us today for this conversation.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you, Justine.
So I know I touched on some of the highlights of your career, but can you walk us through your career in golf? How did you first get started and what led you to your current role at Big Cedar Lodge?
Wow. Okay. Hopefully we have plenty enough time. Kidding. So yeah, it really the PGA journey, really the idea of me wanting to be a PGA golf professional happened in the spring of 1990, and I found a club somewhere close to where I was living in Minneapolis, and it was a club that had two 18 holes and a 9 hole. It was very busy, specializing in corporate outings, and I had to learn really quickly how chaos worked and how to work through lots of different tee times and lots of different events, etc. So the best part of that journey or that experience was that's where I met my wife Sheila.
Aw.
Married 33 years, and so that probably would be the most fond memory I have of that where I started. From there, really, a couple years in, was able to find my way into a really nice private country club, maybe about 10 miles away. And that's kind of where it kind of took off because I was really hired to be the director of retail there. And so I took a Mill River shop, for those of you who know how that works, and was able to really take that and triple the revenue in the 5 years I was there. And really doing that through just branding and getting the better brands, working harder with the members. So really was on my way to becoming what I was going to wanted to do, to be a head golf professional. But then this little thing called Polo Ralph Lauren came along, and they were entering into the golf business, and I was buying from them, and the rep was local to Chicago, but he covered 11 states, and they really needed to backfill in, and I was chosen, and that was a big break for me. And quite honestly, at that point, I'm going to be really honest, it was just such a huge financial gain. I mean, and I was able to keep my PGA status, just in a different classification. So really that's where I made that first leap. And then, as you had mentioned in the opening, I did stints with a lot of very nice brands and met a lot of wonderful people, learned a lot about retail. And really, really for me, when I made that jump, I had my 4 or 5 favorite reps that were really, really good. And then I had a whole bunch in the middle that were good. And then I had the ones that were not so good. And so I was able to really believe that my movement over to Ralph Lauren was going to be easy because I knew what it took to be a good rep. And so I went out and did that. And so really I spent, 9 years with Ralph Lauren. The first half of that career was really building a 5-state territory, living on the road, traveling with samples, showing. So I really understand what it's like to dig it out of the dirt, if you say. And so And I think I really did well there. I really grew that territory up, and then that led to what I thought was going to be great, and that was the promotion. And at that time, my wife and I had three daughters, and the opportunity was you're either going to New York or Greensboro, and so Greensboro it was, and we ended up in the Carolinas, and so I spent a good year or so doing that, managing the PGA show and all of the U.S. Opens and the Ryder Cups and all the events Ralph Lauren was involved in, and that was fine and well, but what I found myself really into was Monday through Friday in an office, spreadsheets instead of product and people, which I really like. And so at that same time, when all that was kind of wrestling through my mind, is when I ran into who we all know, Chris Knott, and he was starting this. He was kind of maybe a few years into this Peter Millar brand that was really becoming something, and so he was seeking someone that could come help him, that had a good operational background and help. So and I ended up moving from Greensboro to Cary or Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina to take that job. And so again, my journey had some interesting stops, but I'll kind of fast forward. I ended up bouncing a little more than I wanted to. I took an opportunity with a friend to have my own brand. We stood that up in 95 or 96, and we ran really well until we ran into the awfulness of 2009 and 2010, and so I had to move on, and so I did stints with a lot of those brands. And so and what the funny part of it is that my last vendor journey was with Johnny O, who it's a phenomenal brand, and back with Chris Knott. And then from there, I got a phone call one day, and it was from somebody that I was a golf pro with, 30 years prior, telling me that he had got this job at Big Cedar. And I was like, well, what's that? I wasn't even sure what Big Cedar was at that time because it was just getting started. And so they asked me for a reference. They had interviewed people, and I gave them my reference. And the next thing you know, they called me back and said, well, what about you? And the next thing I know, I was at Big Cedar. So, in a theory, I've made the jump twice. I started as a director of retail, did my stint in the middle, and now I'm back to being a director of retail. So all those experiences, and I'll get to some of that later, is really led me to really want to help and assist people, because I really truly have sat on every single side of the table.
Mhm. That's so awesome. I always love seeing when folks have been on both sides of the table. And like you said, you never know when someone, like you mentioned, your old colleague reached out to you about Big Cedar. I love when all those things connect and you never know where folks are going to end up. And so very cool there.
Yeah.
Um, how has your perspective moving from the vendor side, then back to director retail now at Big Cedar? How has that perspective shaped your retail strategy today that you've brought to Big Cedar?
Great question. So really, truly, after being a vendor and really, truly understanding all the things that have to happen to pull all of that off, and then to get samples to the reps, and to get the reps on the road, and to get into to get sourcing and design, to get everything to collide together in a warehouse so we can ship everybody on time. I understand how really, truly difficult that is. And so as I have said before in seminars I've done with you and the PGA, really, I'm going to be a vendor friendly buyer because I just understand.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really feel like, and I also have spent time doing the buying and the retail piece, and I know how hard it is to stand up a retail operation. And so for me, that it's just really, sometimes even if it's a young rep that comes to see me, I'm going to help him or her.
Hmm.
I truly will, and I just, so I want to really I want people that come to Big Cedar, just like our guests, even if they're a vendor, I want them to leave and say, wow, that was a really cool experience. And I
Hmm.
want to do business at Big Cedar.
That's nice. I like that sentiment of the sales reps who might come through that they're being treated like a guest of your property.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
truly.
So I mentioned that you were named the 2026 PGA Merchandiser of the Year for Resorts, which is an incredible honor. What has this recognition meant to you both personally and professionally?
Well, thank you. A lot. I mean, it's as I stood there this year, knowing they were going to make that announcement on Wednesday of the PGA show. I literally went back and started counting, and it was like my 36th PGA show.
Wow.
So I'm kind of dating myself a little bit, but you know, truly, I guess the best way to answer that is just the fact that it's a voted by with your peers, and it's people that have won before the last couple of years. It's a committee of people that are industry legends. So these are some people that if you win the award, it's quite the honor because it isn't very easy to win, and the amount of time it takes to fill all of that out and to really put something that matters together. I mean, I think it was about 80 hours of my time. So thank you all of those that believed in me and voted for me.
Very cool. Congratulations
You.
again. So I know one of your key focuses, like you touched on, is helping buyers and vendors understand each other, which you did a great presentation with Grace Hurley for us at the AGM Retail Conference back in January.
Mhm.
From your experience, what are some of the most common misunderstandings between the two sides, even if it's something really simple that, is being overlooked? How can folks overcome those misunderstandings between the two sides of the table?
Boy, am I glad you asked that. So this is something that I'm just really passionate about. And I had this thought years ago, but it took me a couple years to kind of really put that presentation together. Um, and the idea was to really, um, for those of you that didn't go, I had a company build me hats, and one hat just said vendor and one hat said buyer, and we would just change hats. And I really wanted to speak to both sides and really a lot about pain points, and I didn't want it to be negative, but I really felt like when you're speaking, you can just speak and talk, or you can actually challenge people a little bit, and sometimes that makes them laugh, and sometimes it might make them a little crabby, like
Mhm.
they think, yeah, and I really say this in my seminar is like, do I do that or should I do that? You know, and so I really wanted to challenge people, and so, but to answer the question, I mean, it's all the hard work on both sides. I mentioned earlier that it takes to be either the vendor or the retailer. So for me, with my buyer here, I have a golf buyer, and I have several buyers here at Big Cedar. And for my golf buyer, the way I trained her was your vendors are your best friends. You're not going to go on vacation with them probably, but you might. But you're there because we're doing business together. We're doing commerce together, and so we need to treat those people with respect. They do a lot of stuff that you need to appreciate, and she had never been a vendor, so I wanted to get her to understand how that worked, and so things like returning phone calls and being professional and answering everybody, and even if they hit you up through LinkedIn, for God's sakes, LinkedIn's a business tool. And so if somebody does that for me, I don't view that as a bad thing. I view that as they're very resourceful. And if I like what they're saying, then I'll say move to email, and then I'll have an email conversation with them. And so, and on the vendor side is just to really understand the importance of some things. Like, to me, it's probably the most thing on the vendor side is the timing stuff. I get it. Like when you have a knitwear factory and a sweater factory and a bottoms factory and an outerwear factory that's all trying to do the same shade of navy and pink and yellow or whatever you're doing, and then you're all trying to get them to ship from all around the world to come to your little warehouse. A lot of times it doesn't happen the way people plan. There's storms and strikes, and there's all kinds of stuff that can happen. So I don't like to blame vendors if they call me and tell me, hey, there's something that's going to be late. I get it. I'm sorry, like, and then we can go from there. It's just the communication piece. That's the part that I say the vendors need to be better at. Vendors need to call their buyers, and a lot of them do. I want to make sure that I get that out there. But there's a lot of them that don't. They just ship whatever they have, and then they hope and then the buyer gets frustrated. And so we got to stop that. We need to stop that because then that leads to, well, but I don't want to call him back. And it's just, we got to stop that. And that's my mission, you
Mhm.
know? And so if I have to stand up in the middle of an open field and talk and scream at the top of my lungs, that's what I'm going to do. But I really want to, and I really want, what I would love would be to get more vendors in that meeting.
Mhm. Absolutely. That's a great point, especially thinking that, for the most part, I would think a lot of that could be solved by simply more communication.
Isn't that usually the thing, the communication? You know, really, truly. And honestly, the last point I want to make before we move on is, you know, another thing that's been in my mind that I want to do is I want to create like a guided field trip
Oh.
where we have sponsors, like we've got a vendor that'll host one time, and we'll have another one where
Mhm.
a buyer that's got a big operational host, and we can do a field trip and we
Mhm.
can literally show people how painful it is so we can come together and understand one
Mhm.
another. So just mark that one down.
I love it. I love that
Yeah,
idea.
yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And going back to treating your vendors the same as guests coming through your property, are there any examples of how that approach have really positively impacted your partnerships and thereby probably your business as well?
1,000%. So I even took notes on this one. What we do is I had a nice board installed, and when you come to Big Cedar and you come to our retail warehouse, there's a big welcome board that says "Welcome Peter Millar" or "Welcome
Oh,
Ashworth" or whoever it is, and their name,
yeah.
and everybody, you know, I let everybody know in the front office, hey, we've got Ashworth here today, or we've got Peter Millar or Johnny O here today,
Yeah.
you know, and I'll say, hey, if you have anything, wear it, you
Mm.
know, and
Oh,
show
yeah.
support, you know.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and then they'll see it. And sometimes my reps will even say, well, hey, I get you got, you know, let's make sure you have Ashworth, or let's, you know, it's funny how those things work. And so we have the welcome board. We have a very, now I'm lucky, I get it. We have a very beautiful showroom. I've got a 25-foot wall, all with grid wall and spotlights, and I've got a huge board table. I've got a bar in the back. You know, I mean, we have fun, you
Hmm.
know, and we give them a quality place to show the line with
Hmm.
good lighting, plenty of space. You know, we a lot of times have lunch catered in. We make sure they have something to drink.
Hmm.
You know, we take care of that. I have a big monitor in that room, and they can plug in to HDMI, and that's kind of where I use my vendor scorecard. You know,
Ah,
so we
uh-huh.
show them, that's the thing, that another super important thing is that's where they get to see their vendor scorecard, all the metrics, you know, and we cover everything from the sales, the units and dollars and sales, to everything from the margins to the markdowns to everything,
Hmm.
days on
Hmm.
the floor, you know, average retail price. I mean, when I'm looking at a line, it doesn't take me very long to put together 6 shirts and a couple layer pieces. I mean, I probably spend almost more time talking to them about
Mm.
my business, and so
Yeah.
they can understand. And if you understand that scorecard, each of my golf courses has a tab. Now I'm exposing them to all of my inventory that I have. And then you'd be amazed. You'd be amazed at how they're like, well, Jared, you know, I see that you have a bunch of core product here, like some shorts. Why don't we get those out of your hair so we can open up your open to buy? I never even asked,
Hmm.
but I supplied information. What a novel
Hmm.
concept.
Right.
And so, or I've had other bigger vendors that can do that. Will say, well, because everything's logoed in their world. They're like, well, let me just write a check and give you some markdown dollars. Like, I
Hmm.
didn't ask for that. And so, but it's the way I present it to them that allows them to think to do that. And so
Hmm.
and then we also have bus forms in the corner because I like to merchandise. And
There you
so
go.
I have, you know, my buyer Brooke, I have her throw their clothes on the rigs, you know, and so they can see their product. Like, I
Mm.
try to, if you haven't read the book Unreasonable Hospitality, it's like we're trying to do that with our vendors,
Mm. Hmm.
and just to blow them away. And so best example, and we can move on, was, you know, I've got a friend of mine that I actually trained, and she is now a regional manager for Ralph Lauren. And so when she found out I got this job, she likes to come to Big Cedar, which is great. And so she has her samples shipped in. It's a true story. And so she takes the garment bags and puts them in a box and ships them here. My team takes those boxes, unboxes them, hangs it up, takes them out of the bags, steams all the samples and gets them all ready for her, lays all the bottoms out, merchandises everything, and has our catalog. So she comes in, she can just go to work.
I love it. I love
And
it.
then when she's done, she has labels. We say, well, we'll go ahead and we'll pack it up for you nice and neat. She actually likes to pack it up.
Mm,
And then, but I mean, I'm going to do that
mhm,
because I want her to say, okay, wow, like, can I do that for everybody? Probably not. But it's something that, because of the challenges she has to come to show me and
mm.
all the things that she has to do to travel and all this, that's the respect I'm going to give back to her.
Without a doubt, I think that really goes to that treating your sales reps and your vendors like a VIP at your
They
property,
really
whether
do.
it's having a
Hmm.
sign up or just having, a nice quiet place to work without distractions and offering them coffee or I think lunch is such a great opportunity to connect with them and have those longer conversations, particularly if it's a brand you're seeing both men's and ladies and you need to break it up or they're showing multiple lines. It's a great way break it up, invite them to lunch. They can, get to know your staff a little bit better and your business. I mean, you're right on property. It's so great, might as well help them experience what your properties, for you, what Big Cedar is while they're there.
Yeah, and I also, you just triggered something for me. It's also an opportunity for me to maybe have my golf merchandiser come join us for lunch
Mm-hmm.
so that she can ask questions. Or my
Exactly.
admin, the admin that has to like handle all the packing lists and all the
Right.
information. If I know there's something going on, I may say, hey, why don't you come in and now we can talk and dialogue.
Sure, sure. Especially thinking about how few times a year you probably see your average rep at an average property. You probably only have limited hours face to face, maybe twice a year, maybe at the PGA show. And so, really capitalizing and making that like a meaningful event, not them just
Correct.
rolling into property with a rack, you looking at it and sending them on their way an hour later. I think really making that a meaningful visit is will go a long way and they'll look forward to coming back there and helping you with a trunk show or a pop-up shop or those sorts of things too.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm glad you mentioned the vendor scorecard that you all use because I was going to dive into that a little bit next. How do you find that the systems that you have in place, like your vendor scorecard, really help buyers and vendors collaborate more effectively? Particularly, maybe other folks on your team understanding that document and being able to learn from it and use it.
Okay. By the way, I've upgraded it. I've got
Oh,
version 2.0 now,
great.
but enhanced. I'll share that with everybody at the next opportunity to speak. First and foremost, it forces the buyer to sit down, mine data, look at it, and the way the spreadsheet works, if you dump data into each of the courses, then you go to the summary tab and everything populates. And it really forces my buyer to really look hard at those numbers in advance of the meeting so
Mm-hmm.
that she can have an intelligent conversation with them if she sees either positive or negative trends. It also allows the biggest one is the reps. It always kill me. I spent so much time as a vendor and it was amazing to me how many times I would go into a shop and ask, well, how did we do? And I get, well, we did great. Okay, well, how great? Well,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Yeah, pretty much sold out. Okay, well, at what margin? I don't know. Good. It always just like, wow, crazy to me. It doesn't give the vendor much to go on.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I want to do is I want to give the vendor so much to go on that he or she can right away tailor that presentation to be more respectful of my time and show me the things I'm going to be selling, rather than not sure showing you all kinds of stuff that you're like, nah, nah,
Mm-hmm.
nah. It just makes for a way better appointment. It's more pointed.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I mean, I'm not saying people have to be, but I mean, I've been doing this a while. I mean, I can look at the rack and say, I can already see the 6 shirts I want. Like, can I just stand up and grab them and throw them up there? And I mean, I'll have the rep out of there in a half hour once we start product and get them on to their next appointment early. Not that I don't want to be with them, but I just know time's money. And I know they're probably eating a taco on their way to their next appointment, looking at their phone, trying to do emails when they shouldn't be. So, I try to be sensitive to that.
Mm-hmm.
So the vendor scorecard is to me is what we call here at Big Cedar a non-negotiable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not negotiable. I mean, you are going to do a vendor scorecard and you are going to present it in a very professional fashion to our vendors. And I guarantee you, if I lined up 1,000 vendors, every one of them would raise their hand and say, Jared, yes, please make that mandatory.
I
So
love
that's part of my mission.
it. Love it.
Yeah.
So, in today's golf market, there's so many options out there of new and emerging brands, which is so fantastic that there are so many options. How do you and your team go about evaluating a new brand or a new rep? Maybe at the PGA show, seeing a new vendor. How do you kind of go through that process to decide on working with a new vendor and making sure that they're a fit and ready to be in your retail locations?
Yeah, no, that's another great question. So, a couple things really. Golf is, I mean, I really, we have over 20 points of retail here. And I certainly don't buy for all those. I mean, I always make a joke, like I don't really want to buy dishes that say Lake Life on them. I have someone else that does that. But I enjoy buying for golf. I enjoy buying
Right.
for our outdoor amphitheater. I enjoy buying for our outdoor shooting academy. Those are things I like, and so I'm plugged into those industries. I mean, I always tell people, you can tell me a golfer, and I can tell you, yep, he wears Jay Linenberg. Like you just know. I mean, that's what I do. So I'm very aware of not only the brands that are here, but I'm ultra aware of new, and I spend a lot of time on social media. That's kind of where you're going to probably find them first. And then I also have I won't expose my secrets, but we have the Buyers Club. We're a group of buyers and friends that have known each other a long time, and we have a little group text chat that we go to. And if I need a cigar or accessory guy, I can throw that in there, and wham, I've got three or four of them, and or we do a lot of like, hey, like how's Melbourne? Have you bought that yet? Like, how do they ship? Or do you like the rep? Or like, are their cartons good? Do they ship complete? Like, so I think that vendors need to take note that buyers certainly do stuff like that. And so, so I have a sounding board that I can go to, and we can have talks about a lot of the new brands. Or a lot of times I'll find a new brand and I'll take a swing and I'm like, whoa, like really good, like right on time, really quality shipping, great rep, everything was great. And then I'll say, hey, guys, you might want to try this. This is pretty good. And I want my friends to be on the front end of this trend,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just telling you that I've had these experiences and it's really good.
Yeah, that's so important to have that community of folks that are your
Yes.
fellow merchandisers, whether locally, maybe people in your area or friends that you've worked with before. That's so important to be able to share
Yes.
ideas
Yeah.
with openly and honestly. What's next for golf retail at Big Cedar Lodge? Are there any new opportunities or initiatives that you're excited to implement this year and beyond?
Well, I think this year the obvious one is the 250 America's birthday. So obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but really, Johnny Morris, who's our owner, is a very big patriot and loves our country, and we're patriotic here all the time. So this is like going to be like a steroids year, if I will. And so we have a lot of that. We have to be careful not to overdo it, but certainly we've actually, our marketing team created our own Big Cedar 250 logo. So we'll have some really cool products available across all channels, of everything from our spa to gift shop to marinas to golf to, we're going to be using that logo. So, and that kind of dovetails into like, my buyer, Brooke, she's, a phenomenal buyer. She's really come a long way, and she'll be meeting with a lot of the vendors and buying a lot of like the open piece goods they have. I work a lot with vendors on SMUs and special makeups and custom products. And I do that I do get, because of where I'm at, I get a lot of people that call me and say, hey, how do I get into your shop?
Mm,
And so with that, knowing that, like, I'm like, well, it probably starts with, a visit, because I don't think you can rightly tell me I'm going to crush it, or oh, everybody buys this, if you don't know even
mm.
what I have.
Yes.
That's kind of a turnoff to me, actually. But to
Mhm.
me, my favorite story would be Akbar. from Seamus. He and I go way back because of U.S. Opens, and he contacted me and said, Jared, like, congratulations at Big Cedar, and like, gosh, that seems like a great property. I said, well, Akbar, why don't you and your wife come out? And they flew out and spent 3 or 4 or 5 days, and I gave parts, and they drove around and they took all kinds of photos, and they played golf and had dinners, and they got to experience Big Cedar.
Mm-hmm.
And my gosh, when he sent me, or when she, I should say, sent me that art pack, blew me away. It was right on point, and it was so easy to do business with them because,
Mm-hmm.
so I remember going, that's a good idea. And so a lot of companies, I say, well, listen, first of all, no, there's no guarantees, but I do feel that if you truly mean what you're saying, if you truly have an interest in Big Cedar, it starts with a visit. And
Mm-hmm.
you to understand what we do, what are our values, what is our mission, how do we treat our guests, what's important to us logistically, how can pain points of shipping. I mean, I have 20 points of retail that come into this building. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't have it labeled right, if you don't have the PO on the box, and if you split ship me, that's going to be problematic for me. And so,
Yeah.
and I can have those conversations before we ever do business. And so it really helps. So, look for some really cool, exciting SMUs. And I will tell you, it's to kind of, to pique the interest, but it isn't always with golf brands. I've got some cool retail brands that maybe say, well, I don't sell golf, but I'll sell you.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll be a big one because they're going to go, how did you get that in your shop? And so I like that. And I'm lucky because I have the ability to do that.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. I think that's a great testament to folks visiting properties as
Yeah.
much as they can.
Yeah.
As we wrap up here, for anyone who's aspiring to grow in golf retail, whether they're on the buying side or looking to be in the vendor side or sales rep side of things, what's the one piece of advice you'd give to them?
Boy, that's hard for me. You can tell, right? Because I've got a couple.
Sure,
So I
go for
wrote
it.
this. This is one of the ones that I really wanted to think through. And I would say work hard, give more than you're asked for. Be a critical thinker. Think outside the box, ask a lot of questions, and be humble. Be kind. That's it.
Terrific. Thank you.
You're
Great
welcome.
advice. That about wraps up my questions. Thank you so much, Jared, for having this conversation with us. It was so great to learn a little bit more about your career, all the great things you're doing at Big Cedar, and being a vendor-friendly buyer. I think that's so important and love hearing about the scorecard, and I know our members do as well. So thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to another episode of the Fairway to Retail Success. We look forward to having you join us again next time. Take care, everyone.